Hey, my boy. Sorry it's been so long. Um, it's been a crazy week, um, but we did have fun this weekend. We are back to it. Summoner, the Novice, Chapter 15. Here we go. Fletcher used the time he had before the thieves arrived to coax the demon onto his shoulder. It dug its claws into the leather of his jacket, sensing his agitation. Be ready, little fellow. I think this is going to get messy. Fletcher murmured, knocking an arrow to his bow and kneeling for better aim. The men rounded the corner and stopped, staring at him. Back off, or I'll put this through your eye. I have no qualms about putting down a cut purse, Fletcher shouted, squinting down the arrow at the largest of them. The man smiled, showing a mouthful of yellow teeth. Aye, I've no doubt, but you see, we're not so much cut purses as cutthroats, if you catch my meaning. The man sneered and held up a curved blade. All we want's your purse, and we'll be on our way, no harm done. He took a few steps forward, putting himself within 10 feet of Fletcher. The demon hissed and huffed twin plumes of flame from its nostrils that flared just a few inches from the man's face, sending him stumbling back into the others. I'm not messing around here. Leave now or you'll regret it, Fletcher shouted again, though his voice trembled. He glanced at the silent houses around him. Why hadn't anyone heard? Someone needed to call the Pinkertons. How wretched it would be to have made it this far, then die in a dank alleyway on his very first night. Ah, a summoner! You're one of them adepts from Bokan's academy, aren't you? Little past your bedtime now, ain't it? The man said, brushing himself off again. Leave, Fletcher said, realizing the demon could probably only breathe fire a certain distance. He didn't want to test that tonight. Well, now you've shown me yours. Let me show you mine, the man said, then whipped out a pistol and pointed it at Fletcher's chest. Fletcher almost loosed the arrow then and there, but the muzzle jerked as the man walked forward once again. Now, which one do you think will hit faster? The gun or that there bow? The man asked with easy confidence. Fletcher eyed the pistol. It was an ugly thing. The metal rusted and the barrel cracked and worn. It doesn't look too accurate, Fletcher said, backing away. Aye, you're right there. But say it missed you, and you put that arrow through my eye. My two friends here will come at you sharp-like and slit you from ear to ear. We could both die here, or you could make it easy and give us what we want. There's not spellcraft or demon can do against a bullet, summoner, the man said, his voice steady and confident. Something told Fletcher the thief had played this game before. I'll take my chances, Fletcher said, loosing his arrow. The pistol belched smoke with a clap, and Fletcher heard the crack of an impact near his chest. Light flared across his vision, yet he could feel no pain. Perhaps I would come later. The demon's squeals rung in his ears as he crumpled to the ground, smiling grimly as he saw the thief fall with an arrow in his skull. The two men behind stood frozen. They'd not been expecting Fletcher to go through with it. Wrong, actually, came a well-spoken voice from the shadows at the end of the street. There's plenty Spellcraft can do, like throwing up a shield, for example. The scarred officer Fletcher had seen in the tavern emerged, striding in between the two men. A growl came from the gloom behind him, so loud that Fletcher could almost hear it rumbling in his chest. I would run if I were you, advised the officer. Without a second look, the men turned tail and sprinted around the corner. From what Fletcher could hear, they did not make it very far. A loud snarl echoed from out of sight, followed by screams that swiftly descended into a horrid gurgling sound. Fletcher covered his face with his hands and took a deep, sobbing breath. That had been a close call. Here, the officer said, holding out his hand. You're not injured. My shield saw to that. Fletcher took it and was pulled to his feet. He patted his chest, finding no damage. Instead, a glowing crack seemed to hang in the air in front of him, like broken ice on an opaque lake. It was embedded in a large, translucent oval floating in front of him, which was barely discernible to the naked eye. Even as he reached out to touch it, the shield faded into nothingness. He noticed a bullet had fallen to the ground, its round shape flattened by the impact. Follow me, said the officer, striding off without looking at him. Fletcher paused for a moment, then shrugged. The man had saved his life. He wasn't going to question his intentions. The imp clambered up Fletcher's back and slid into his hood as he followed, exhausted by the excitement of the encounter. He was glad, for the officer had been staring at the demon intensely. Saccharissa, the officer yelled. A shadow detached from the gloom and nuzzled the officer's hand. The officer tutted in disgust as the creature's muzzle bloodied his fingers, then pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped them fastidiously. Fletcher darted a glance at the demon and caught sight of a dog-like creature with 4 eyes, a normal set with a smaller set a few centimeters behind. The paws were more like a feline's than a dog's, however, with claws over an inch long and caked with blood. Its fur was black as a starless night, with a thick mane that ran along the ridge of its spine down to a bushy tail that put Fletcher in mind of a fox's. It was as large as a small horse, its back coming up to Fletcher's chest. He had imagined other demons to be the same size as his own, yet this one was large enough to be ridden. The enormous creature's flanks rippled with muscle as it prowled beside them, making Fletcher almost sympathetic to the men who had died at its hands. He and the officer walked on in silence. Fletcher considered the tall man. He was hard-faced yet handsome, perhaps in his 30s. The battle scar that adorned his face filled Fletcher's head with imagined scenes of battle being fought, arrows whipping overhead. The streets were already beginning to empty, and though the creature attracted a few furtive looks, they were soon alone as they turned off the main road and down an empty street. What kind of demon is that? Fletcher asked, if only to break the silence. A canid. If you'd paid attention in your classes, you would know that. It's probably the first demon they introduced you to. God knows it's the most common. So, you're a truant and a dunce. I would expel you on the spot if we didn't need every adept we can get, no matter how sorry an excuse they are for a summoner. I'm not from the school. I only arrived in the city this morning, Fletcher said indignantly. The officer stopped dead in his tracks and turned to face him. The man's unblinking milky eye stared at him for a moment, and then he spoke. Our inquisitor said that all the commoners who tested positive as adepts have already arrived at the school last week, the officer asserted. If you're not one of them, who are you? A noble? And who gave you that demon? Nobody gave me the demon. I summoned it myself, Fletcher replied, confused. Ah, you're a liar, the officer said, as if he had finally understood, then continued walking. I'm not, Fletcher growled, grabbing the man by his coattails. In an instant, the officer had him up against the wall, holding him by the scruff of his neck. Fletcher's imp hissed, but a roaring growl from Saccharissa silenced it. Don't ever presume to touch me again, you little prick. I've just saved your life. Then you decide to tell me a preposterous lie. Everybody knows that summoners must be given a demon by someone else before they can capture their own. Why, next you'll claim you walked into the ether yourself and plucked a demon out like a pea from a pod. Now tell me, Which summoner gave you the demon? Fletcher kicked at the air, choking as his windpipe was crushed. A name floated unbidden to his mind. James Baker, he gasped, patting at the officer's hands. He let Fletcher down and smoothed some imaginary wrinkles from Fletcher's jackets. I'm sorry. I let my anger get the better of me. He apologized, his face filled with regret as he saw the welts his fingers had left on Fletcher's neck. The war takes toll on the mind. Let me make it up to you. I'll book you a room at my inn, and I'll send you up to Vokon Academy on one of the supply wagons tomorrow. My name is Arcturus, and yours? He held out his hand. Fletcher took the hand and shook it, the violence instantly forgiven at the mention of the academy. Its reputation was legendary, the training ground for battle mages since Hominum was first founded. What took place there was a closely guarded secret, even to the soldiers that fought alongside them. Arcturus's invitation was far beyond anything Fletcher had dreamed possible for him and his demon. Fletcher, no harm done. I'd have far worse than a bruised neck if it wasn't for you. The way in which I received my demon is rather a complex one, which is why I was confused by your question. I'll explain it all to you tonight if you'll let me, Fletcher replied, wincing as he rubbed his throat. Yes, you can tell me over dinner and a drink. My treat, of course. If I remember correctly, James Baker was not a very powerful summoner, so capturing a rare salamander demon like yours would certainly have been beyond his means, though I suspect he would have kept it for himself if he'd managed to get a hold of one, Arcturus mused, continuing down the street. Is that what this is? Fletcher asked, looking at his demon. He grinned as Arcturus turned into an expensive-looking inn, smelling the telltale scent of cooking from inside. Tonight, he would stuff himself with food and soak away all his troubles in a hot bath. Then tomorrow, it was on to Vokon Academy. Whoa, crazy. So, he's going to demon school. Can't wait to see what happens in chapter 16. I hope you're having a great day, and I love you, and I'll see you soon.